Well, as Trelane is pulling that up, we're continuing our journey through the book of Nehemiah, the bullfrog. Oh, yeah, Jeremiah. Yeah. Oh, Jeremiah, Nehemiah, same thing. Huh? And so we've last week we started, looking at them building the walls, and basically it's what I said. It's a laundry list of names and what they did and so forth. And so I'm just was kind of walking you through that third chapter. And I think we did this one, but I thought I'd start here just to kind of get your brain back into last week. And again, in verse 12, Shallum was the ruler of one of Jerusalem's districts. He worked on to repair the next section of wall with the help of his daughters. Some scholars believe, though, that his daughters refer to the rich widows that lived within his district, and they helped by defraying part of the expenses by subsidizing the next wall. And again, if this reference is to be women working on the wall with men, it is somewhat unique. But as we saw last week, according to Thucydides, don't know how to say that exactly, when the Athenians attempted to rebuild their walls after the Persians had destroyed them, it was decreed that the whole population of the city, men, women, and children, should take part in wall building. So that's a nice family outing, wouldn't you say so? A little picnic lunch, go out there and haul rocks. So, okay. We didn't get this far, did we? I don't think we did. Okay, in verse 13, one group rebuilt the valley gate and repaired 500 yards of the wall. Now that might seem like an extraordinary length, but remember that some areas only required repair. Verse 14, a ruler from the district of Beth rebuilt the dung gate and hung bars in place. Beth Hekkerim means house of the vineyard and served as a fire signal point. So if they see the enemy coming, they can light the signal fire and people know what to do, right? It was 2 miles south of Jerusalem and may have been the residence for one of the district governors during the Persian period. Now this is kind of interesting. Notice in verse 16, there was a man named Nehemiah, son of Azbuk. Okay, so here we have another Nehemiah. He was the ruler of a half-district of Beth Zur, and he made repairs up to the point opposite the tombs of David and the house of heroes. Beth Zur was a district capital 13 miles south of Jerusalem. And the tombs of David is on Mount Zion and is still venerated today by Jewish and Christian, actually, pilgrims in the Koinaculum building. House of Heroes, this may have been the house of David's mighty men, which perhaps served later as a military installation. What's interesting with this particular place is not only is it the so-called tombs of David, but that place right there happens to also be the upper room. Yeah. And according to the biblical description of where the upper room was, that's it. And I can remember being in there. I can kind of remember the whole thing there. It was kind of interesting because it seemed like we were downstairs like street level. And I can remember everyone had to go to the bathroom. I mean, we were all just dying to go to the bathroom. So we go to this building, and I think it said Tombs of David, And so we're at this building, and it's kind of open. It's not like there's doors, it's kind of open. So we walk in, and there's a little sign with a male figure and a little sign with a female figure. So we all just assume that's got to be the bathrooms, right? So the women go around the corner on their end, and we go around the corner on our end, and we walk in there, and here's all these pilgrims on their knees praying. And it was not the bathroom. Yeah. And if you ever go to Israel, remember there's no toilet paper in the bathrooms. At least in the touristy areas, there's no toilet paper. So just to give you a warning. But yeah, you should write that down, yes. Yeah, eventually we did, yeah. I think it was when we got on the airplane. No, I'm just kidding. But no, we did find the bathroom. And but it's kind of funny because just because you see a little image there of a silhouette of a man or a woman does not mean necessarily it's the bathroom. Because remember, the Jews worship separately. And, it made perfect sense when we saw them on their knees, praying and everything. But and then we went like upstairs and across some kind of walkway, and we go to this, and this is the upper room. And according to archaeologists, they say that if this is not the upper room, then it's certainly very much like the upper room. It was, would have been right next to the upper room. I mean, this is it, okay? And it's big. It's huge. And I can remember I think I kind of went to like one of the corners and just looked at all the people everywhere. It's filled with people. And just thinking, wow, this is where Jesus was with all of his, 120 disciples, the men, the women, everybody, the Last Supper, the whole thing. And, very moving experience. And so, again, to the Jew, it is the Coenaculum building, but yet to the Christian, we call it the upper room. Verses 26 and 27, the word ophel means swelling or bulge, and so refers to a fortified hill. Cross-reference there is Micah 4:8. It was located just south of the temple area, 2 Chronicles 27. The ruins of a large tower was discovered by archaeologists on the crest of the Ophel Hill in 1923 through 25, and excavations in 1978 date it to the Persian era. So it's kind of cool. They can pretty much figure out where everything's at, and they can date it fairly accurately. There was also the water gate, which led to Jerusalem's main source of water, which was the Gihon Spring. And so as far as the gates go, there are 10 named gates in Nehemiah. I know, Paul, you made an in-depth study on that. Here's what I got, okay? This would have been now Nehemiah's time, okay? So here's a map. It's very hard. You can't really read that. But the sheep gate, it started with the sheep gate, and formerly it had been known probably as the Benjamin gate. Then you have the fish gate, which later becomes the Jaffa gate. And I'm sure you're going to correct me if I'm wrong. Then you have the Jeshanah gate, which is also known then as the Old Gate or the Gate of Ephraim. We've got the Valley Gate, the Dung Gate, or sometimes referred to as the Refuse Gate, the Fountain Gate, the Water Gate. I keep wanting to put a picture of Nixon up there, but then I figure, you all know my jokes already, so there's no point in me doing that. The Horse Gate, the East Gate became the Golden Gate, the Inspection Gate, the Mipkad Gate, the Gate of Gathering, and the corner gates are not listed, but not all lists totally agree. Okay. A lot of controversy. Some gates are in different areas. Does that look roughly right, Paul? The prison gate. I thought the prison gate was also the water gate. No, I don't have that one. It was not on my map. Now, if we look at Old Jerusalem today, again, you've got the Lion Gate, the Golden Gate, the Dung Gate, the Zion Gate, Jaffa Gate, the New Gate, the Damascus Gate, and the Herod Gate. So I think there's only 8 actual working active gates today. Yeah. We know that the one gate, I'm going to assume it's the eastern gate, was closed by the Muslims because that is where Christ is supposed to come through when he returns, right? And so they blocked it off because, isn't it the east gate? Yeah, the east gate, yeah. But at least they believed it enough to where they blocked the gate. They walled it up. So 3 types of people that I wanted to kind of pull out of that list of people. 3 types of people. The first were the useful people. The useful people. In verse 1, we saw the high priest Elishab and the other priests setting the example by being the first to work. Verse 12, a man again named Shalom worked with his daughters. I don't know if his daughters or not, but they worked very hard. In fact, some people rebuilt or repaired entire sections of wall between the gates. Their work ethic is amazing when we consider that most of these people were not construction workers. In fact, they came from every walk of life, including rulers. We read that, all the rulers from different towns nearby, priests, laborers, goldsmiths, bakers, businessmen, and perfume makers. That's what I call teamwork. Yeah, they were all Jews, yeah. And if there weren't, they were sympathetic to the Jews. But people from every background. In verse 5a, the common people of Tekoa did double duty. These people worked hard to fulfill the vision that God had given to Nehemiah. Now their names are documented in the annals of eternity in service to God's kingdom. So just imagine if your name is in the Bible for your great services. Oh, wait a minute, it is Paul, right? Yeah, but anyway, you never know. Anyway, so that's what I call, a grouping of what I call the useful people. Then you have the second group of people, which are the users. Verse 10, a man named Jediah made repairs to the wall that was opposite his own house, and yet apparently he did no more. Now they were expected to do the work on the wall that was near to their house. And maybe he was old. Maybe he couldn't do more, but I think the principle is sound. Starting the work by your house, again, it's logical, but then you should keep on going. In verse 5b, the noble aristocrats of Tekoa hated manual labor, so they would not submit and put their backs into it. That's the way Nehemiah worded it, right? They wouldn't put their backs into it. Yeah, now one possible reason for their reluctance to work was because they were allied with Tobias and pledged allegiance to him for their own personal gain. So remember, there's a lot of spies, a lot of double agents, which we'll see that a little bit more in the next chapter. And then we have the third group, which I call the useless. The useless are not necessarily lazy people, but rather they were people that try to do harm. There's at least 7 recorded attempts to thwart Nehemiah's mission. Again, 2:19, we have Sanballat, Tobias, and Geshem mock Nehemiah. In chapter 4, beginning in verse 1, Sanballat and Tobias continued to mock Nehemiah. Chapter 4, beginning in verse 7, we have his enemy threatened a military attack. Chapter 6, beginning in verse 1, Sanballat and Geshem attempt to lure Nehemiah outside of Jerusalem to Ono. And I'll tell you something, here's a word of advice from your pastor. If somebody ever wants to lure you out of your house to a place called Ono, yeah, then red flags should go up on that one. I had that happen to a friend of mine. He's a pastor. A couple of weird things happened to him, but one day he's sitting in his living room with his family. They're watching a movie, And, they got the lights kind of off, And the next thing you know, here's a strange man just standing in their living room looking at them. And, of course, you could imagine how they freaked out. And the pastor got the guy out real quick. And I don't know if it was before that or after that, but they got a knock at the door. It was another strange man. He says, well, Pastor, I need to talk to you. And he says, well, what is it? He said, well, come on over into the field across the street here so we can talk. And he says, no. He says, you tell me right now. He said, well, no, I'd rather go over in that field over there. And so he said, well, you know what? If you want to talk to me, you make an appointment like everybody else, and he slammed the door. Yeah. But again, if it's called Ono, don't go to Ono. Chapter 6, beginning in verse 5, Sanballat threatened Nehemiah with false charges. Chapter 6, beginning in verse 10 there, Shemaiah, Noadiah, and others were paid to prophesy falsely to discredit Nehemiah. In fact, Noadiah is one of the few women in the Bible that is actually listed as a prophetess. And there was a time she was a legitimate prophetess, but then, for whatever reason, she turned corrupt. In 6, beginning in verse 17, Tobias had spies in Jerusalem who wrote threatening letters to Nehemiah. You ever get a threatening letter? Yeah. Yeah, I've had all kinds of weird stuff happen already, right? So let me just say a few words about Nehemiah. We're going to get more into Nehemiah's leadership as we go on through the book, but I wanted to make a couple of comments. Nehemiah's leadership was exemplary since despite enemy opposition, he was able to convince the people of the needs and then coordinate them to accomplish the mission. Naturally, some people did a better job than others, but that's true of any business, church, or organization. That's what we call the 20-80 rule. Right? Y'all know that rule, right? 20-80? Yeah. Okay. The task seemed monumental for such a small group of people. However, don't forget that most of these people were not yet living in Jerusalem, but in the neighboring villages. And I'm just amazed at how all these leaders that came out of these villages and went to work, And it seems logical that you'd want to help only because Nehemiah has the king backing him and the proclamations and it seems like, hey, let's get on the king's good side. Let's go help, Nehemiah was also very detailed in documenting the work that was done. So Nehemiah was a man who could organize both people and projects, and this provides a great example for us today. For example, in chapter 2, beginning in verse 11, before making detailed plans, he conducted a survey of the situation. That's what you should always do, right? Before you make a plan, you got to find out what you're dealing with first, right? You survey the situation. You want to get all your facts. In chapter 7, verse 3, he also made a detailed assessment of the people that were available. He did not neglect the unglamorous work. He established key objectives and then gave assignments to responsible men of faith. So he was a great leader. Chapter 3, verse 1, beginning in verse 1, he gave recognition, mentioning people by name and where they worked. And that's an important thing. It's very, very hard when for example, when we pray Wednesday night, we got this sometimes this huge, huge list of people. But I try to name them all off. Because whether it's your name or the name of your family member or the name of your neighbor, you want to hear their name, don't you? Where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. Yeah, thanks for joining me in that one. Yeah, but anyway, but really, don't you agree? People want to feel important. I don't care who you are. It's not that you're trying to stroke their self-esteem, but I'll tell you, the janitor and the maintenance man is every bit as important as the CEO of a company. I remember Charles Stanley once said that he has a guy who puts a new battery in his wireless mic every Sunday. even if it doesn't need a new battery, but they always make sure there's a new battery in there. He said, because if that battery goes out, millions of people around the world will not get that message. And so it seems so inconsequential, a little battery, but it's a big deal. Chapter 7, verse 2, Nehemiah had high standards, and he practiced delegation of responsibility. This helped to instill confidence, and he made people feel as if they were more than just cogs in a wheel. Chapter 4, verse 9, Nehemiah was able to face opposition and avoid violent confrontation. He withstood insults, innuendo, intimidation, and treachery. And, I don't care who you are, at some point in your life, you're going to run into a bad situation in your life, and that's where you're going to be at, right? But Nehemiah kept his cool, and he outlasted them, didn't he? The real test of spiritual leadership is to accomplish God's mission God's way. And Nehemiah did that. And so we'll look more at Nehemiah's leadership later. So now, can you switch me to the next PowerPoint, please? Yeah, I took a class one time entitled Leading Like Jesus. It's one of the greatest classes I've ever took in my life. But I would have to say, next to Jesus in the Bible, I have to say Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a great leader. So Nehemiah chapter 4. We're moving right along there, aren't we? So let's begin with a couple of questions to get us thinking. And the first question is, how could Nehemiah have known what his enemies were saying and doing, and vice versa? I thought of that. Maybe he got it from, that certainly is a possibility. Yeah, Paul. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And yeah, I think that right there is the primary answer. Um, and well, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Why do so many people hate Israel and the Jewish people? So they had power, they had wealth, people were jealous of them perhaps. Maybe they owed them money, didn't want to pay. Um, right. Paul. Right. Yeah. Yeah, because a Palestinian isn't going to call Israel Israel anyway. They're going to call it Palestine. Um, yeah. Um, Even back in the earliest days of the Bible, the Jews were referred to as stiff-necked people. You know. Yeah, but they were also stubborn. They were also and I don't want to stereotype. I don't want to stereotype them, but sometimes Jews have a reputation for being stingy. They have a reputation for being prejudiced. Um, yeah, but we see this problem going way back, way back. So it's been around for a while. Yeah, and you know what? You know, Shelley, that's a good point. They're God's chosen people, and most people don't like that because everybody wants to be God's chosen people. You know, why should they be God's chosen people? You know, maybe I'm God's chosen. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I think there's a jealousy factor, and you know, think how blessed we are through the Jews. I mean, if it wouldn't be for them, we wouldn't have the Bible. We wouldn't have Jesus. We would be all basically going to hell. So we should be very grateful to them. I think it was always bad for the Jews, but especially when they crucified Jesus. And paraphrasing it here, but you know, here's Pilate. He says, "I found the man innocent." He symbolically washes his hands of the matter. He didn't want any of that, you know, blood on his hands of an innocent man. And you know, the Jews cried out, "Let the blood be on us." And I think that was the biggie right there, you know, and it had been downhill ever since. Is it biblically acceptable to pray for a curse or calamity to befall one's enemies? Why or why not? Mm-hmm. Well, Neen, you said we're supposed to love our enemies. So give me an example. Okay. Yeah, because a lot of times we think love means feel, but it doesn't really mean feel, does it? It means that we have to display that love. Paul. Yes. Yeah, because they just weren't the enemies of the Jews or the enemies of Nehemiah. They were God's enemies, you know. And so, yeah. And then, if you, well, okay, I don't want to get too much into it. Are threats logical? Why or why not? Is Nehemiah is going to be threatened up and down and sideways? No, threats can be intimidating, but are they logical? But you know what? Doesn't it seem like everybody thinks God is on their side? Doesn't everybody think that they're the good guy and the other person's the bad guy? Because I always think I'm the good guy and the other person's the bad guy. But then again, I'm sure that guy thinks the same thing. Right, right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I would, here's the bottom line with a threat. If you threaten somebody and you do carry out your threat, by threatening them, all you're doing is preparing that person to be prepared for you, And you don't want that person prepared. You want to sock him when he's not paying attention, right? You don't want to prepare him. And then if you don't follow through with your threat, now you look like a liar and you look like a weakling. So really, it's better to quote Theodore Roosevelt, to speak softly and carry a big stick, right? Did Jerusalem really need a wall? I mean, wouldn't God protect them? You think so? So they really didn't need a wall. Mm-hmm. Well, God, though, did give us a brain. And, God told him to build a wall. So, yeah, tall fences make for good neighbors. And, yeah, because if you notice, I mean, the people, well, Nehemiah too, but the people, they're doing all the work. And so it's like, well, we do the natural, then we depend on God to come and do the supernatural. But he still wants us to do our part. Just kind of like when, God called out Lazarus out of the grave. Lazarus, arise! And, why did he name him by name? Because if he would have just said arise, then every grave would have opened and they would all come out, right? So he said, Lazarus, arise. And but he told the men of the town there, go over there, roll that stone away, and unbind him. But Jesus could have just snapped his fingers and rolled the stone away, or made the stone disappear. Took the bindings off of him. But no, he had the people do what they could do in their power, and then God did what he did in his power, So that seems to be a common thread in the Old Testament and the New Testament. So Nehemiah assigned watchmen on the wall. Do we have watchmen in the church today? And if so, who are they and what do they do? Paul. I like that. That's a good answer. That's a very good answer. And yeah, I don't mean to back up either, but going back to the wall thing, remember last week I told you that a lot of it was psychological? It's to rally the people together behind a common cause where they could do something and be proud of their work, and I mean proud in a good way, not in a bad way, but to be proud of their work and to be re-empowered again. Because, these people have been used and abused, and they, the people were walking all over them. And didn't Nehemiah say at the very beginning to rebuild our walls to get our dignity back? Yeah. And so now he's re-empowering the people, to do something for themselves, and he's going to, and you'll see how he keeps on doing that. I think that's a very good point. So, yeah, we have watchmen in the church, and some churches will use the term doorkeeper. And, you got to be careful sometimes who you let in the door and who you don't let in the door. I think it was my very, very first week at Wayside, Barbara changed the sign out front and said, "Everybody welcome." And I said, "Can you take that off?" And she said, "Well, yeah, but why?" I said, "Well, is everybody welcome?" And she said, "Well, yeah." I said, "You mean the devil's welcome?" You know, I mean, there's a lot of people who wouldn't be welcome, who might want to come and do us harm, right? So I never use that term, everyone's welcome, but, certainly if you love Jesus and you want to come and join us and worship Jesus together as a family, then you're welcome. But sometimes you got to be careful of how you word things, because people will hold you accountable to what you say, right? Do Christians sometimes carry a lot of debris or baggage in our lives or their lives? And if so, what are some examples? Because, one of the biggest problems now with building this wall and, rebuilding really the whole city is it is just filled with debris. And they get to the point where there's so much debris, they don't know where to go with it, and they can't build anymore. And I feel like sometimes our lives get like that too, don't they? Get filled with debris and baggage, and you can be a Christian and still have a lot of debris in your life. What are some examples of that? Sins, yeah, sins. Forgiveness, yeah. Yeah, grudges. Yes. I was thinking, that's what I was thinking too, difficulty with family, right? Because you know what, if you've ever been worked in a secular job, somebody always has problems at home and they bring their problems to work. And it slows everybody down. It's no different with the church, right? Could be divorce issues, could be problems with the children, could be this, could be that, could be illness. Doesn't have to be sin, but maybe they've got an illness. Could be anything, right? So we bring a lot of baggage with us, and sometimes we can't really function as well. I remember many, many years ago, I heard a children's sermon, and it was just so basic, but it was so good. I never forgot it. But it was about, how Jesus tells us that we need to let our light shine. And so the person giving the sermon had a flashlight, and they kept turning it on. It just wouldn't turn on, man. What's wrong with this thing, right? So they open it up, and you figure, oh, maybe there's no batteries in there. Well, there are batteries in there. But hey, what's this piece of cloth in here? It's a little piece of plastic. What's this toy in here? And so I start throwing all the garbage out, and now the batteries could make contact, and now you could let your light shine, And such a really basic thing, but, and that goes right back to church growth too. Because it's not always that you got to do all these things to accomplish church growth. Sometimes all it is eliminating the things that are hindering your growth. If you just get rid of the stumbling blocks or the roadblocks that's hindering growth, I find most of the time growth is a natural byproduct. So. All right, well, good discussion. There's those mean guys again. Nehemiah 4, beginning in verse 1. When Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, remember this is Nehemiah's memoirs, right? So he's writing, When Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria, he said, "What are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are?" Tobiah the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, "What they are building, if even a fox climbed up on it, he would break down those walls of stone." Okay, so in verse 1 begins with Sanballat and his associates along with the Samaritan army. And just in hearing that the Jews were building the wall creates this great anger within him. It just goes to show his bitter hatredness for the Jews. Just hates the people, just hates them, Any possibility that they might be doing well made him angry. So he scoffs by asking a series of sarcastic questions. The first is, what are those feeble Jews doing? So when he says, what are those feeble Jews doing, what's he basically saying? Yeah, first he's making them sound like they're stupid. Like, what are they doing? Like, they don't know what they're doing, right? And then he calls them feeble, which means that they're weak and have to be fed, spoon-fed, right? Or something. Yeah, feeble, their numbers low, they were generally, poor, many of them. And here they are, they can't do anything. What can they do? And then he says, will they restore their wall? That's kind of like Satan in the garden. You had mentioned that the other week when Satan said, you were thinking that too. Surely you won't die if you eat that fruit. Again, a difficult and intimidating task to carry out, so much hard labor in the heat. Here you got a bunch of old men and women and children. What are they going to accomplish, right? And will they offer sacrifices? That's pretty sarcastic too. He's kind of implying here, perhaps if they worship God, He will build the wall for them. I can remember when was it Elijah on Mount Carmel was being very sarcastic to the prophets of Baal, right? Well, how come your altar's not lighting up? Is your God, maybe he's on vacation. Well, maybe he's in the bathroom right now. Well, maybe he's sleeping now. Let's wait till he wakes up. He's just being sarcastic, and these people are sarcastic too. Will they finish in a day? In other words, if they don't finish it in a day, they never will, because they're going to say, the heck with this, this hard labor and this heat and all this stuff, man, it's not worth it, right? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are? Now, the stones were probably limestone, and if you remember, they used to hewn tombs out of the limestone walls. So it's a very soft rock. It's a rock that can be cut and chiseled and shaped and scraped. However, the fires would have caused them to crack and crumble. The rubble had to go somewhere, and they surely, what right there? They surely, either way, surely the stones couldn't be patched back together again, So they can't glue the stones back together. So, these guys at least did have an understanding of the difficulty of the logistics behind building that wall. In verse 3, Nehemiah the Ammonite said that if a fox were to climb up on their wall of stone, that it would crumble down. Foxes are mentioned because they were known to infest in great numbers, especially in places that were ruined or desolate. His statement could also be translated to say, if so much as a fox appears upon their half-built wall, if so much of a fox appears on their half-built wall, that he'll himself come and knock it down. So that could be just a different way of wording that, The word fox can also be translated to jackal. In other words, if the Jews make any overt or covert move, he's going to strike. Notice that the enemies of the Jews began with scoffs and insults, which they knew would leak their way back to Nehemiah. So they knew they had people in their midst. You know, they had a whole army there and all kinds of people. They knew they had people in their midst that would, you know, get word back to Nehemiah. You know what? Golly, we're really out of time.